Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
You got to match the energy. This is the thing.
Yeah.
You got to match the energy.
Bring it.
Bring the energy.
Bring it, Tommy.
How you doing?
Yeah,
there it is.
There you go.
There it is.
Good morning.
I keep thinking to myself, at some point in time, we need to go on a, Explicit Measures world tour, and I can't wait till we hit Italy.
Ooh.
And Tommy shows me all the things I'm eating wrong about Italian food.
Do we have followers in Italy?
Do we have followers in Italy? Your mom follows us.
This is wow.
But she's not from Italy, though. She's Italian.
No, that's what I was about to say. Yeah. I think we need first generation.
Does your mom still listen to the podcast?
Probably the last few weeks since I haven't.
This is how she connects with her son.
That's funny.
Well, if you're in the chat this morning, feel free to say hello to Tommy.
Yes.
Mom, when you start a new job and it's also your own company and the HR department's terrible.
Kind of not wrong. I've gone through that pain, and it definitely, you overwork. I think was it Tommy? You were telling me something like this. It was businesses fail in the first 6 months, but businesses are a success after 2 years. Was that you, Tommy?
Yeah, it was basically from a book. It's the guy who's very successful. He's like, things fail. It takes 6 months for things to fail. It takes 2 years for things to succeed.
So you've made it 6 months. You got to keep going to make it to 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, do you guys get to play, kind of games around that? Well, being the CEO of this company, I'll take into consideration your request for a human resources response. I will send them a note.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No.
Noted. HR. Noted.
We'll talk to the legal team and we'll come back with a response.
Yeah, right.
Amazing. Awesome. So a couple articles came out. Well, actually, one article that we want to talk about is on the Microsoft blog. There is a new releasement article around data sets are now in Power BI mobile apps, and now you can refresh your data sets while also on the go. So when you're going to the bathroom and you're hanging out for time, scanning YouTube, Facebook, whatever, you can now refresh your data sets. So what do you guys think about this new feature?
I think well. My first reaction was, oh, great. Now I can do my job more from my phone. My second was, well, along with this comes the push notification, right? So you through the app, it'll push notify you if a data set fails. Now that's cool because there's a lot of plumbing you got to set up behind the scenes if you get that working, which you could right now. But ease of use kind of feature enablements like that, I think are fantastic. So the two scenarios that kind of pop in my head, I guess, right, would be, hey, somebody wants the freshest data and you clicking refresh is going to work.
Yeah.
But if something's failing, you're not going to be able to solve that from your phone anyway. Hitting refresh is just going to end up in the same failure.
We're waiting for the blog behind this one. Now, open data models on your phone and model your entire model and write measures on your phone now.
No, I
cool feature.
Yeah. I completely agree with Seth. The ability for the push notifications for very business critical data sets where you really need to know at any point, and it may be your responsibility. The push data sets work seamlessly, though. I was really surprised how quickly or just how easy it was just to refresh a data set from mobile. It's easier on mobile than it is on the web.
I like the idea of, I think to your point, Seth, I think this idea of knowing on your phone when refreshes fail. I mean, golly, everyone has a phone stuck to them somewhere, right? I mean, you leave your house without your phone, you're like, I feel like I'm, losing an arm kind of thing. I mean, people are so attached to their phones, and maybe that's showing you a bit of my heart, how much I'm attached to my phone all the time. But I think when there are data sets that are extremely important to know what's happening with them, what's occurring with them. I've built reports for companies that track every time a data set refresh happens and making sure that it's working. And, for those mission critical things, you 100% want to know when it fails. And you need to know what's happening all the time when that data set is having issues. Now, granted, again, I may be away from my computer, at least there's, I'll be notified. But I would say I'm not sure. So I think this to me will be a feature that I'll be using when I'm physically away from my computer. I don't think I'll be using this in conjunction with, okay, I'll have my phone up on my right hand side or my iPad up and then my computer. It'll probably still be something that I use when I'm not near an actual PC.
Yeah, and the other thing I would caution is you can accidentally go the other way. Like having push notifications is great. I would not recommend putting on every single data set unless
Yes.
all of them are mission critical.
Yes.
Right, which
Yes.
is usually not the case.
Yes.
Otherwise, what happens is it'll take a day, and it's like ding, 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 like the notifications
Oh, let's hope you're
stop meaning something.
Yes.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
let's hope your data set refreshes just
It's a little bit better than
continually,
that.
like don't go, but it's over notification of failures as well.
Well, it depends. Is your data source Excel? Then yeah, bing, 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 bing. It's going to notify you. Tommy adds a column, and all of a sudden, all my data sets fail now because we got one new column inside our data set.
Fabric Great Lake is doing just fine right now. Good, thank you.
I will agree. Yes,
Yes.
But luckily for us, we've been pulling everything from CSV files, so it's much harder to add a column in a CSV file at this point. Very true. Very good article. Really like this. I think this comes. I don't know if they're still doing this, but I believe the team out of Israel is doing a lot of the development here in the mobile app, and so they do pretty cool stuff. I like what they design. They do a good job on the design work for all the mobile application pieces. So nice job, team. Looks good. Looking forward to trying out that feature. All right. Let's go over to talk about some of our main topic today. So today there's another article we're bringing out. It's actually in the description. We'll also add it here as well into the chat window. The topic for today is the symbiotic relationship between data governance and data storytelling. I think data storytelling is awesome. I really like it. I think there's a lot to do there. But data governance, I feel like, is something some organizations have their hands around. I've walked into a number of organizations who have data governance in place, but don't really understand what data governance looks like with the context of Power BI and what is the surface area of how data can be moved and shared around. I think the challenges I see here from my perspective, Power BI really changes or adds the ease of sharing to a whole new level. And so data governance becomes a whole new story. So initial thoughts on the article, gentlemen? Anything you kind of want to pick out here and start talking to?
Man, if there's an article meant for us, like the two topics we probably talk about the most, data governance and probably storytelling and framing.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
could they have picked the two topics we talk about every single week?
Yeah. No matter what, they come up at some point. It's a very interesting take, and I'll be honest. Going through it, do I agree with everything, or does it make perfect sense? I'm still digesting that. But the idea for those listening, the idea here is there's a very mutual and beneficial relationship between data governance and storytelling, where they, in a sense, complement or they can be to the determinant of each other.
And I like how they open the article. So the opener here resonates very much with me, right? You can't tell a good story on bad data. You get a weird story, right? Yeah. Well, did you know that, if we only hired another 100 salespeople in the month of December, we could always have the highest sales every year? Well, that's because that's the end of the year, and that's when that's when we're something like you could have weird stuff going on in your data that really makes this just like not helpful. But I mean, when you talk about, even particularly for like machine learning things, right? If you're talking about a machine learning algorithm, the algorithm is always performing at its peak performance. Again, there's things you can tune, add features or take away features. But when you start looking at like what level, when you look at the research, when you say, how can you improve an AI model, give it better data. Whenever you give it better data, it produces better results. This is kind of like really speaking to that artifact of better governance, better control, better understanding what that means, really can impact what the output of the story looks like. Yeah,
I like the word symbiotic. It's cool. The combination or his linking really the foundational aspects of a lot of back end data grunt work, being the groundwork for like the story, right? A narrative that is being told. I like the thought, and I agree with it from the standpoint that, to your points, Mike, you can build pretty visualizations and you can build a story, but if your data is garbage, like at the end of the day, one of two things is happening. You're either going to start hacking out data to make it fit the story, which is absolutely not what you want to do, because then
No.
you're modifying the actual truth, right?
Mhm.
It's not just cleansing, it doesn't look the way I want it to.
Yep.
But I think it also highlights, and where I'm going to spend, I think, most of the time today is talking about that trust factor, like laying the groundwork. And when we throw out buzzwords of like data quality or data governance, there's a lot that goes into that, right? And I like the value prop that he's pushing and pulling here, because the shiny fun is the storytelling, it's the narratives, it's talking about the insights and the reports themselves, but by him inextricably linking these together in a symbiotic relationship, right? I think is a really good analogy, if that's an analogy, or a good use of the word, or a combination of thoughts. Maybe that's a better description.
Which one of you two was very
Me.
Seth.
Yeah, I think
Sorry,
you're right.
sorry, too late.
No, I think you're actually right. Who made a big distinction between data quality and data governance? You remember a previous podcast? Okay.
Oh,
okay.
data quality
This
and data
guy.
governance.
Yeah.
This guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be. I think it would definitely. I mean, I definitely think there is a difference between the two.
Yeah.
I do think they're very
Component of.
interrelated though as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
So like it's definitely, yeah. I think I was
Good
the
call
other
out,
opinion of
Tommy.
ones.
Good call out.
I
Yeah.
only say that
You're-
because it
is
took
that a
20 minutes to
stick?
get past that.
Yeah, good stick. Good stick. You're right. I'll stay in my lane. Data governance. Sorry.
Well, I also, I mean, again, I'll keep harping on this one as I do with all these episodes. I feel like everything's very applicable. Again, not all data is created equal. Not all data needs the same rigor that you're talking about. I think the impact of the decisions and the seriousness of the story really decides a bit more rigor around where did that information come from, right? Anyone can just pull some data from some system, start talking about stuff, and look, our sales are up 30%. We're good, no problem. Let's move on. In reality, costs have increased more than 30%, right? So there could be other things that are a factor here, that the story is not comprehensive. So I would say in some cases, right, where that source of data comes from needs to have other sets of eyes or other analytical team leaders to kind of really review that story, and the message in that story is going to potentially weigh very heavily on the business.
Well, and I mean that's what we've always pounded on too, is you cannot have proper data story framing or storytelling or have the empathy if you're not speaking the same language, or if people don't even trust the person doing it too. It's the user, it's the final result, it's what they're actually asking for. All that goes into exactly what you say. I would be curious though, because we always talk about that side of the relationship. We say data governance to data storytelling. But if this is a symbiotic relationship, then that means it affects it the other way too. And I don't think that's something we've touched on a lot. Is how does data storytelling affect data governance?
Ooh. I don't think I've ever taken that kind of angle on this before. I mean,
Right.
I kind of assume
because this is symbiotic, so they affect each other.
I think whether it's an implied meaning or I caught it in his closing, I can't tell, because when I think about that, I think the storytelling is what is up front and center to the wider audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not good data, if it's not accurate, like we've all been part of like the report that is somebody pokes a hole in and the whole thing starts leaking, right? Like that is where there's a real negative push into, hey, why is this data wrong? This is somebody's fault. But in reality, it pushes towards, well, if you guys don't have a governance strategy, you can't expect high quality data coming out of here, right? So that's a negative one. But on the reverse side of that, you have trust, you have like insights coming forward that are making significant business impacts, and then you can push back and rely and point at we have all this because of all of the efforts that we're applying to the data and the structures of that before you guys even see it. That's kind of how I saw it.
I want to jump on your story there as well. I've read the random statistic, and I'm trying to Google it here very quickly just to make sure I'm not going so off the deep end here. I think there was a research paper done. I think this article was written by Robin back in 2017, but it was basically, the headline is Excel errors. How can Microsoft spreadsheet be hazardous to your health? Basically what it was. Spreadsheets, right?
Okay.
And it's basically, it was saying something like the idea that research had found like 90% of all spreadsheets or sheets of information that was coming out of Excel, 90% had some sort of errors somewhere inside the Excel sheet, right? And I can't tell you the number of times when you build the Excel sheet initially, yeah, it's probably spot on. But, after months of working on it and, copy pasting cells and moving formulas around, sometimes there's that one cell that was like, whoops, I missed the formula here. I'll just go correct that, right? There's usually little errors that appear in there and potentially cause issue with that. So to your point there, Seth, though, I think that's potentially the same scenario that we're seeing here as well with the data storytelling and the government. Right? You're bringing the data together, you're manipulating in Excel to start fabricating what is that story. And I think this is a skill that can, like, to some degree, I feel like the storytelling element here is kind of a learned skill to some degree, right? Being able to know what is the most important piece of data that I need to look at? Where does the largest amount of sales? And I think I come from this I was in a category management team for a number of years, working on understanding where markets were going and which companies were making which sales and why, right? So, looking across an entire industry, trying to figure out who was making moves inside those different that industry, and making sure we understood, okay, if company A adds a promotion, how does that impact everyone else? What is the market share gain or loss of people? And so even though as us a company, our product sales may have been down, we have been may have been gaining market share for whatever reason. And in the industry we were in, there was a lot of weather-based analysis going on, right? The weather impacted whether or not we sold a lot or not. So when you look at those things, there's a lot of stories that can kind of come out of that ecosystem, and you really had to figure out, okay, where is the most impactful story? Where did the largest or data impact come from? And it's not easy. It takes some time to kind of really think through, how do I identify all of the datas and figure out which one drove the most return or loss in sales. And I think this is kind of speaking to this article summary, right? That data story element, you can only do the data storytelling after you have some solid data to support it.
Yeah. Real quick here. I don't think we attributed this article yet, did we? Like, this
I don't think we did either.
Haro Wiersma. He's an independent consultant and data governance evangelist, and he has, I think, I looked at several of his other articles on Medium, so check him out. I like it. Anyway, back to your story.
Sorry.
Storytelling, spreadsheets, fabrication of them.
Well, and that was really my point, right? I think a lot of times we go at, so I think this, from my standpoint, the storytelling, we usually come in with a preconceived notion. I think a lot of people come in, and again, I'm definitely at fault of this too. I want the data to say something in a specific way. So I want to jump in there and say, okay, I want the data to show this kind of analysis. And so you start kind of looking for preconceived notions. You kind of have to come in with an empty mind sometimes and let the data tell you what's going on, and try not to bias and push the data around so you get the story that you wanted versus what's actually there. Because you may not like the story that's there.
Yeah, the manipulation of data. It's a good point. I get the one point you made earlier that I want to kind of go back to is,
okay.
I think you said that not all data goes through a governance process.
Mm-hmm.
So if only parts of the data organization would go through the rigor to what the end goal of that for us would be, like certified data sets and things like that serve very focused insights in certain reports, or the report audience is such that the business wants to invest in the additional steps.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I kind of want to talk about with like the governance part of things, because quality data is part of that, like an outcome of having a process. But when we talk about data, it's, you know, accuracy,
Mhm.
completeness, consistency, right? Are the
Yes.
three things that he starts with. And all of those require somebody, whether it's an analyst, whether it's like probably an analyst, because they're spending a lot of time in the data, and it's taking taking the requests, but also understanding the business. Are my tables complete? Is the way that we're shaping or applying business logic to this data, like resulting in this combination of quality? And if things are dropping out or we're filtering them out,
Mhm.
what is the purpose and the reason behind that, so that
Mhm.
the entirety of the business understands what is happening in this secure or
Mhm.
accurate method by which we're doing more due diligence around data than we had before. And that's a lot of work, especially as data keeps consistently coming in. You need build monitoring processes around capturing errors or
Yes.
issues. But I think this also like teases, I guess, a thought in the lake house versus data mesh conversation, right? Where essentially a data mesh is saying like, hey, this is going to be data controlled or owned by business units, and somehow combined and collected. Does
Mhm.
that stress governance strategies to you? Like, because now I have to apply a governance policy to all teams and they should be managing their data in a certain way, or do I have to double validate that before I, put together a certified data set? Because it's easier in like if I in a centralized way, if I'm saying, hey, all data is coming in through a lakehouse, we're going to apply all of these policies to make sure that
Well,
we've cleaned the data and created a certified data set on the other side of it.
Mhm.
Can I get the same expected output in both those realms, and at what cost? I mean, obviously the answer is yes, but like I see a real challenge in one versus
Yes.
the other.
well, I wonder if there's some value towards. I usually think of governance downstream to storytelling. Like whatever you do in governance is going to enhance storytelling. But as I think about this and think about it more of a call like the recycle symbol, right? Of storytelling and also enhancing governance. Think about what storytelling could do to highlight certain areas of the data or certain things where look at the value that is provided or look where we need help. And part of storytelling can also be, and maybe in a little pilot program of look what storytelling has done where we're highlighting things that we need to do. We're highlighting the priorities that governance needs to focus on. Um, and that could possibly be one way where we can then begin to say we can't upgrade this yet or we can't promote this yet until we get these certain things done. But we always think of storytelling as for like our sales, our marketing, but we don't think of storytelling for governance. Like what governance programs are we trying to do? What governance programs should we do? And part of that goes to data quality too, but highlighting things like, hey, these are the stepping stones. If we want to have a higher data governance, we need to fix these issues, or these are the things that we need to work on.
Yeah, and I guess there's a couple of thoughts I'm leaning on both from both your comments there. From your comment, Seth, right? There's going to be some sort of cost associated with governing data. And again, I want to be clear when I'm talking about governing data, I'm talking about these are the guardrails by which we say we're going to do certain things or not do certain things. And so, to me, what governance means is when there's a data set or when there's some data that's published, we know who the owner is. People are actively looking at the data. I'm not saying like literally you can't access this table or not access table. Yes, that's probably part of governance as well. But all things being equal, there is some business designed processes, right? Hey, we're going to load this data in from finance, right? There's going to be someone from finance that's going to sign off and say that the numbers that we have in our reports are reflective of what we see in the actual system, right? So there's someone kind of going through some quality checks. Like you don't have to necessarily, there's not like maybe a set rule there, but there's guardrails that are saying in order for something to have quality, we've documented a process. We put something down on paper that says these things have occurred in order to make sure that the data quality is reviewed and someone has looked at it. So to me, data governance is kind of speaking to some of those I wouldn't say they're intangibles, but they're more of like a process around, how everything works relative to um, the space of governing and deploying that governance to an organization. Now, once something gets through that process, you've spent money, and in all cases here, what you were saying, Seth, it's going to take time, effort, money, people. It's going to cost something to do the governance. So you don't want to govern everything, because why spend money on the Excel sheets that are just kind of hanging around, right? Let's spend money on stuff that's important.
That I think has been the learnings over time, where it's like, hey, we're going to boil the ocean and create the singular data warehouse where everything is in here, and all decisions have to be made by us adding something new to this warehouse, right? Like, I think we've evolved to the point where it's like, no, we don't need everything in there. It's very business focused, very business driven, and it's the highest priorities and objectives of an organization that should be focused on. And tools have come a long way to say, like, hey, you may have this centralized data source, but you have your own data you need to bolt onto there. Well, now you can in many different realms, right? Like composite models, or if you have access to data and it's unified within the organization, there's actually many different paths for you to like start to merge or write a query around the same sort of cleansed data to add the value to your reporting outside of just that specific realm.
That's also part of the adoption roadmap too, where they talk about the data governance. Kind of their role is to highlight or prioritize what initiatives need to get done.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the Center of Excellence is positioned very well to listen to the business whine about where problems are, right? Across the organization, right? I mean, seriously, right?
Whine about
what complain, voice their distaste for, like, whatever. There's problems, there's issues all across the organization. That team is trying to get people access to things they need to do their daily job. Again, I see them as
not just access too, right? It's
they're an enabler.
They're they're the enabler, because they're going, whatever our biggest hindrance right now. Well, if we want to have this sales quota dashboard, or people look at that, we need X, Y, and Z. Okay, is that a priority? Okay, we're going to put that initiative out to do that.
Yeah.
But honestly though, as I think about this more in relation to the article, why couldn't this data governance team, and this has been like our holy grail too, we've talked about too, is creating a data quality dashboard, right? Or that idea of having that ability to see what are the projects or where are pain points from our data quality. We don't have that, and it's really hard to do. It's not an easy thing to do, and where do you start? And I'm thinking of, how can data storytelling affect that data governance team? Like, what could they do to actually enhance their ability to make a decision?
Why you keep driving and driving and driving at the data storytelling, driving backwards, and I don't understand why.
Well, so according to if the article is going to say they're symbiotic, it means that data governance is not downstream, or storytelling is not downstream to data governance, right? It means one has to affect the other too.
They're right, but we've addressed. Anyway, I could just be missing like the direction here.
Sure,
they are absolutely linked, because you can't have a story without the data, right?
Right.
And the better and more quality data you have, the more accurate and accepted the insights and things you're going to be pulling forward from the story. I can't have a story without data. I can't do governance. Like I don't know. Maybe I'm just missing it.
It's probably me. It's probably me.
So Tommy, what are you saying then, Tommy? Then you're saying that from the data story, you will now change your governance strategy or add things around governance?
Well, I think that's the question, because we've always focused on that you cannot have storytelling without the governance, right?
I'm not saying, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I mean, I think you can get, I think I liked in the article, he started talking about trust. Trust, I think, is a very important element here about what's coming out of the information, right? If I can trust the tables or the model or the information that I'm giving. And again, one of those things that we can do to instill trust in the business is we can give the business. So there's a lot of thoughts here. Hold on, let me consolidate these down. when we start looking at Power BI, there is multiple layers of depth. We can start exposing data to the business, right? I can give them a report and say, here's your data. Behind that report is a data set. Behind that data set is tables, right? And in either one of those areas, you can have localized business logic being applied and manipulating the data such that it makes sense to the creator of that data set or table upstream. So what you can do to the business is say, okay, instead of just giving you a final report, let's expose something a little farther upstream. Okay, now business user, you're going to get access to the data set. Again, there's still another layer or gap between the tables and the data set now, but they're getting closer to where the data is being originating from. And then there's one step even further and saying, okay, well, hey, Mr. Business User, we now have technology that's going to let you see all the tables. Hey, what we're going to do is we're just going to go to the reporting system, right? The stuff that runs our daily business. We're going to copy those tables and we're going to drop tables into a tool, hopefully Power BI or Lakehouse or something there. Hey, I'm going to just work to get the data out of the source system, and I'm just going to land tables of data for you there. So there's literally no transformations occurring between what is happening in the enterprise production system and then what the business can see or use with the data. Now, there is a skill around taking that raw data and being able to shape and form it into the story that we want. Right. You know, that monthly sales report, those things that we were looking for. But as you go further back upstream, you're removing more risk to what could be interpreted as a mistake or changing the quality of that data. Does that make sense what I'm saying there?
Yeah. And like I said, I could have been wildly off because I'm in my head, I'm thinking storytelling has dependencies on governance, but is there that the other way around? And like I said, we can parking lot that, but I was trying to explore that. And
I would say my initial thought, based on what I've read from the article, I think it's more around, the importance, identifying the importance of data governance and knowing that there is a related terminology. There's a relationship between the governance and the storytelling. I'm not seeing from the article saying, because we have such compelling storytelling, we're now able to push that back up into data governance. What I feel like it's saying to me is, or how I'm interpreting the article is, it sounds like it's saying these two things are very interrelated, right? So if you have a very strong storytelling, if you have a very good storytelling, be considerate of what your data governance looks like as well, because you kind of need both of these things to think about them holistically. One of the things I found that was the most challenging for me in the business is just getting people to own data in the business. Like, that is incredibly difficult, I felt like, for what I was working in. And maybe that was because, leadership needed to take a little bit of a different stance on what needed to be done in order for people to own portions of data. But when you start talking like master data, costs per product, who owns what pieces, like if you think about a product you sell, there's likely different teams that own portions of data that relate to that product.
Now, that can hit to the heart of something, because if you own your data, you're going to care much more about the story, aren't you?
I would agree. I think there's a skin in the game kind of story here. Like, I want the business to kind of take ownership of things. And I think, oh man, this is actually a good point you make, Tommy, right? My analogy earlier of going further upstream from report data set tables, the further up I go, I'm actually handing off to another team. There is more responsibility in your hands now. You need to do a better job looking at or analyzing the data, and you're going to have the responsibility of building your own data models. So if you build a crummy model that's super slow and not efficient and calculate the wrong things, that's on you now, right? That's not my responsibility. The ownership has shifted away from that central IT organization potentially and moved more into the business. And maybe the business wants that. Maybe the business is going to say, we're going to hire people who know how to do this stuff.
Yeah, but you say that. So as we're talking, I'm thinking, you say maybe it's shifted away from centralized IT. Well, it kind of already has in many cases, because data is stored in many other locations that IT teams don't have control over anymore.
Agreed.
Third-party systems are a huge one, right?
Yeah.
I'm actually,
We've gone through that conversation
We've
already.
gone through that one before.
As I'm cycling through like my own question of like data mesh, lake house, I don't think it matters, because I think governance actually impacts whatever strategy. Either it's
Mm,
the owners of the data source being centralized IT, or the owners of the data sources being business units. There's a, yes, they own the quality of data that's going into the source system, but it also means that we still have to do the checks and balances on our end, right? Like we're still identifying that there are problems with data. We're not just going to arbitrarily. You wouldn't develop a process that would just arbitrarily say, oh, because it's coming from this source, we believe in it, right? Like you're validating that everything coming through meets the criteria by which you would expect it to from the business, right? So I guess I'm answering my own question, or would appreciate your insight. Is it, in reality, governance is more than just one team? It's actually, like, if we're talking about quality data coming through that governance process, it can involve and should involve more than one team, regardless of regardless of the architecture of how you're utilizing the
I would
data.
agree
Because,
1,000%. Yeah, even with even with handoffs, right? Like I'm still
right.
responsible up until that point
Hmm.
of the integration side. If I'm responsible for the data coming in, well, I need to
Well,
be responsible.
and
Yeah.
if anything, the way I see this is there's a lot of processes that we have that validate data, and if you're
Mhm.
failing one of our first like, absolutely, it's our like, we can create monitoring, or those checks and balances to let the business know, hey, there's some bad data that you guys have now, right?
Right.
You may not have known that it was there. I'm identifying that for you, and you can go quickly fix it.
And we always forget about the responsibility of the input of the data too. We're always like, well, you didn't do
Mhm.
That's
those
what I'm driving at.
transformations. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's, well, and that goes to the story too. And I've seen that in my own career, where we're like, oh, well, the data is bad, the transformation is bad. It's like, no, you guys don't own your inputting of your opportunities. And because no one's checking and balancing that. And if you
Right.
want this to be accurate, if you want us to tell a story, well, we need to actually have these allowed values, not, the opportunity is, I think it should work kind of thing, and that ability. Yeah. And I think that's going to Mike's point too, also, yeah, once you start owning that, you're going to care a lot about what you see in there,
Mhm.
rather than, the data is wrong. It's like, well, no, you put it in wrong.
Yeah.
But
And this is less like, there's some political chat going on here where you can start butting heads between teams,
yeah,
if big if I think this is the if you don't have good policies, right?
right.
Or an agreed upon structure within the organization that, hey, the governance team, the central BI team, the COE, like the group of people that manage data, control what we do as an organization, you follow them, right? Because, and I think that's the importance of having this framework, because it's not a finger pointing game. It's,
No,
this report is wrong, or this data has a problem in it. The responsibility of the owner of that data is this person.
right.
Go fix it, right? It's more of the racy of like, who owns what, so that we can fix
Ooh.
what we need
Yeah.
to as quickly as possible, right?
And
It's not a blame game. It brings everybody up to the same standards within the organization, saying data is a first party citizen. We want to ensure that certain data within that system is working at peak proficiency. It's all of our jobs to ensure that that is the
you know,
case, and we
that,
all have different parts to play in that.
that's a really good point, because I've seen a lot of places where there's so many technology pieces around it. Like, well, in order for us to do that, we have to input it in 3 places or do 4 or 5 things. It's like, okay, then let's take a step back. If we really want it, then we have to change this process. And it's
Yeah.
almost outside of the world of data governance at that point, and just policy and process of
Well,
that team.
isn't governance part?
That's
That
data.
is
Well,
governance.
yeah.
But
So
yeah,
policy and
but
process is data governance. I
no,
mean, that's
totally.
the
But
point there.
for the business on just how they conduct themselves on a day-to-day basis.
But you're right though, Tommy. I think a lot of times so there is a miss in people's minds.
I think,
I'm going to go use these tools, and there's like, I'm going to go buy this third party tool. I'm going to go buy the Salesforce thing. I'm going to go buy whatever these things are. There's a whole bunch of tools that are available to you. And now with this proliferation of like technology, it's so easy to sign up for software as a service and get access to stuff and
Mhm.
start putting data somewhere. So because of the ease of that, there's not this complete mindset of, oh, by the way, I need to get the data out of this thing. I need to make sure it links to my other data that's product master or some other information. So, to enter in the right product SKU or number, or, there's data that probably needs to be added into these other systems so that way when data comes out of them, you can correctly join it back together again. And I can't tell you the number of times that just gets cobbled together with well, we didn't really think about the data strategy of what data is going out to systems and then what data is returning. And therefore we have this super cobbled together like scenario of, we don't know what anything links together. There's no relationships between data. And now we have all this area in our world it's a data has no home, right? We needed to build relationships between this old enterprise system and this new system. It's the same product. It's in two different systems. It has a different number or SKU or identifier or whatever that is. You can't synchronize them. So someone has to go through and kind of link things together. There's a lot of that activity. And again, just making sure that there's a strategy around that. That way, when you incorporate these systems, someone's asking the question, yeah, you want to turn that on? No problem. How are you going to link that data back to what we're doing already? So that way it's not super difficult to get it joined here. One other point you guys were talking about here, and I want to just propose an idea here, is it sounds to me like at some level, there was a little bit of conversation between the chat thread and what you guys were talking about was there is this concept of the data catalog. And I think, Seth, to your point, right? When you have data coming from any system, right? So people are doing things with data. The number of times I find something in an organization where there's two of the same thing, there's two of the same measures in different models, or we're trying to calculate the same thing with across data models. There is this kind of concept of like the data model or the data catalog of what everything has, where all the data lives, the tables and information that we get as an organization. As Tommy and I were kind of playing around with Fabric this last week, I felt like Microsoft is making a move here with Fabric, and kind of what they're developing next is this idea of domains and domain-specific information, this idea of the lakehouse and one lake. This makes total sense to me. I really think this is a great way of thinking about organizations, but what now is happening is we're potentially getting into a place where there's a proliferation of a lot of data artifacts that are inside an organization that are more easily discovered to users. So being able to quantify and catalog what's in these tables, where do I go look for this information? What's the quality? Like, there's almost this concept of we have things that are certified, but how can users feed back to that team and let you know this data source is missing these columns, or I can do 90% of what I want, but I'm missing a little bit of information here. Can we add this? And what does that look like to a backlog? And so I feel like there's a story here in this scenario where we're talking about, yeah, in order to have a good data story, in order to have a good data governance program, part of your strategy should be around cataloging the things you've already worked hard to build and how to share that with people so they can discover what is the data they should be running from.
Yeah, I love the idea. I mean, I think even part of governance, right, or a strategy of a central BI team is not just to create centralized data sets for specific reporting. It's to enable business users to access data. And data catalog is one of those things where you bring the context of those curated data sources, right, to a library or list where people can go and access that data directly. And especially in larger organizations, right? Like you're not going to have the Excel file that's like, here's the link to.
Yes, exactly. Here's the link to my Excel file on my OneDrive that you can go get.
I want to agree with you so badly. Like I really do, but because
Tommy, you're more than welcome to. I'm not going to hold you back.
Yeah.
Let's do it offline. No, but I really think Seth harped on something that I think is really, no matter what the technology or the interface or the whatever you got in front of you is, if people don't have the skin in the game or direct consequences of or benefits of their governance or ownership, then I don't think it matters with the catalog or whatever you have. Because if it doesn't affect me like truly in my role, then it's not going to matter what I see on the screen. It's going to affect BI, but it's not going to affect the change unless it actually you become you have the hot chair, so to speak. If something's wrong and that's actually going to affect me in my role, then the data catalog is just there.
Well, again, I think it's an idea of like discovery, right? So again, I don't know. This is the challenge I think I face in organizations. I don't know what I don't know. Like I don't know. Like there is
it's a visibility problem.
Yeah, and I've even seen this same way for things that we built, like at Power BI Tips, right? We have these great theme generators, we have these great tools, and Seth and I are like, yeah, this thing's amazing. All right, let's write a blog post. Great, we did it. Blog post is out. Let's walk away, and then we come back and be like, well,
that didn't go to the audience that we wanted it to.
We do one thing, and then we talk to people like, hey, they're like, well, we're building this theme. It's very difficult. Have you seen our theme generator? Oh no, we haven't seen it yet. Like, so there's this concept of like, there's a discovery. If you're not in the know, you don't know. So like, what governance thing? So instead of training people on, or maybe even bringing to them, here's the data set, or here's the data sets you have access to, maybe there's a broader topic here that says, okay, we're going to communicate across our governance strategy. Here's what we're doing. We're going to start centralizing and locating things together. And where I'm trying to push on this idea a bit is, it feels to me like, since Power BI is trying to be that central area for data, and now that we brought in data engineers and data scientists also into this ecosystem, we need a better method for the One Lake Data Hub, right? We need a better method for being able to apply domains to a finance or sales team and collecting all the workspaces together that data they build comes out of, right? We need a better process for communicating what is certified and how to discover what is inside a certified data set. So to me, I'm thinking like Microsoft is going down this path, but the data cataloging is so important here. It helps you identify who is an owner. It helps you identify, descriptions and how data is supposed to be used. A lot of those policies we've just been talking about, I think, become written out and communicated via the data catalog. And so that's where I'm really excited about the Unity catalog thing from Databricks. I know it's not a Microsoft product, but I think Microsoft is catching up here.
Yeah.
And, our dream day will be, watch me go get data from a source system, watch me build a lineage from, SQL Server through bronze, silver, gold medallion architectures into a data set, into a report, into a visual with a measure attached to it. I mean, that is the story. How can I give users full visibility from this measure came from here, and walk me back up the story of where that data came from originally? Because that's incredibly powerful.
I mean, right, and that's, I think, one of the things where data catalog falls apart is it's a documentation center, right? That has to be maintained and upkept. However, that would be significantly different than having a framework like Fabric provides, where I have my domains, but like, can I toggle that this one's going to be available for people to view, right?
Yes.
And then they can see the lineage, and then they would be able to see like, maybe there's a summary or a blurb of like, hey, this is what this thing does, right? And this is a part of our production system. So I don't have to do anything above and beyond that.
Yes.
Love the idea. And I think there's just a whole lot of different features and capabilities that the architecture that they've kind of laid out within Fabric is really appealing. Before we run out of time, I do want to poke on one part of the article that did get me. We did talk ad nauseum in episode 135 about the buzzword storytelling. Right? Like, is there like the governance and storytelling? Like, we're encompassing all insight reporting, visualization, like, etc., contextualizing data and providing that to customer end users, where storytelling is, we were talking about, is very specific to one part, I think, that he talked about, which is infographics, right? Like, it's for presentations, it's very narrowly focused, whereas a lot of the reporting that we do, right, is much more related to like providing insights in reports, and it's not really storytelling, or is it?
Well, we had the great episode, I think, that really distinguished that with the story framing. And I think that, because how many organizations internally are doing infographics? I don't know.
Internally?
Internally, right.
Well,
Yeah,
but are building a report for a particular purpose, for a
Maybe for like the
one-time thing.
Q3
This
yes.
end.
is
Yeah,
you've
sure.
done
But
this before,
yeah, but is it really an infographic? I don't
but at
think
the
I've
same
ever
time,
sent to the board
the challenge between but
18
the challenge
people.
between
Yeah.
this is like if you spend a ton of time and you are analyzing
Yeah.
data and you're trying to find an answer and you're bringing insights to a
Sure.
high level meeting, or you're
Oh,
trying to convince somebody of something, you're absolutely building a storytelling report
I see
Yes.
what you're
that may
saying.
not
Yes.
tell the same story next week.
That's
You know what
true.
I'm
Yes.
saying?
The
And
data
that's
Yeah.
changes, the story may be different.
there's a purpose
Hmm.
behind storytelling. We talked about that
Well,
at length in 135, which is why
that's
not
a
every
great
why
point.
I'm poking here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's like a negative thing. It's just when I talk about bringing like data governance and quality to reporting, it's all reporting. It's not just a specific, realm of
Yeah.
storytelling. And not every report is storytelling. Every report should provide insights that are actionable, but
Mhm.
there's a lot of analysis that goes along with a lot of these reports, understanding the framework, like your business area, and gleaning insights from them, and then telling your own stories from those reports.
That's a great point because usually those infographics, or we'll say infographics, but are not just like giving me a state of the union. It's usually some initiative like the
Yeah.
e-board or the c-board's asking for,
Yep.
and it's a very targeted slide 1, slide 2, or page 1, page
Mhm.
2 is because each one is a request that they wanted to see. And my gosh, better the governance better be there, right? But
Yeah, yes,
yeah,
exactly in that
yeah,
case.
yeah. And I mean that's kind of a great point too for your storytelling to highlight to your seaboard where their uh gaps, but again that's few and far between. Like that's not your day to day, nor is that most of the department's day to
That's
day.
why I'm saying
Yes,
there's a distinction,
there's a
and why
huge
like
distinction,
buzzword of storytelling
right?
kind of irks me.
Well, I will, but to me whenever I hear storytelling in an article now, I just think of the article about story framing, about like that's kind of our role. People just think
Okay.
story, and that's what I think he's saying too. Like we're all using the
I'm
wrong
not.
word.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, 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 yeah.
there's plenty of nuance in what he's determining or
Right,
saying is storytelling. I'm
right.
just saying we spent a whole episode
Oh
talking about
yeah,
it, so
and I
it
like
poked
one
me.
of my favorites. Yeah. Well, I just think the idea of being able to frame the story because you have a report that you're not changing every week. To your point, it's not like it's a report that's refreshing where it's not going to tell like this distinct, this bar chart or this particular campaign. It's meant for this kind of self-service. Okay, I'll stop talking, Mike.
So
Good transition.
yeah.
Thanks.
All right, I'm done, Mike. Your turn. Pass the torch.
I was off the guardrails.
Yeah. I really like this conversation, and I don't think there's a silver bullet yet. I don't think there's like a single like do this one thing and everything will be happy with data governance and your data quality challenges. I definitely think this is an organization by organization stance that organizations need to figure out what time, level, and effort. And I always kind of I draw a graph for people on a wall here when we always talk about like 100% data quality all the time. So I would draw like basically an asymptotic curve for those who know maths. It never reaches the line. Basically, it keeps exponentially growing closer and closer and closer, but never really gets there. And I said, this is the graph of 100% data quality on the x-axis, and then money spent on the y-axis. Right? You could just keep spending money, and it gets that last threshold of where data is 100% quality becomes incredibly expensive, and there's always effort or time or money being spent in order to keep the data clean and quality. So organizations have to really sit back and say, what level of threshold are you willing to accept in data quality in order to get your reporting done, right? Certain parts of the business, they're a little bit looser with the numbers, right? Financial sectors are probably much tighter with the numbers. They don't want to be losing your money. Oh yeah, well, we lost 10% of your money, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. We've got it somewhere. We'll just go, shake the couch cushions and hopefully some money will pop out, right? So there's definitely industry specific things but with that higher data quality comes additional cost. And so
Yep.
I think this concept here is very relevant. Organizations have to decide where they feel like they fit and how much money they want to spend towards this.
Mhm.
with this, I went back to ChatGPT, and I this is our ChatGPT segment time. I went back to ChatGPT and I asked them, I asked ChatGPT two things. I said, summarize this article, and gave them the link to the article, and it did an okay job summarizing the article. However, right behind that, I asked a second question. Actually, this is Bing Chat was what I was using, and I said, how does data governance impact data telling stories? And it gave me answers. And then right behind it, it gave me the link. For more information, link here. And when I clicked on the link, it went back to the same article that I was just on and highlighted like literally the sentence or two that it used inside the. There is creepy good things happening inside ChatGPT. It knew me. It asked me to summarize this article. It knew I was referring to this article, and then the secondary question, it used the context of he just asked me to summarize this article, and then a detailed question about it, and it went back to the article and found the answer to the question and put it back into the ChatGPT as bullet points.
I don't know
I
if
thought it
that
was gonna
speaks
take us
so
to, like,
well
this
to
live
ChatGPT or so poorly on us for not seeing
Maybe
that part of the article.
My prompting was so bad. The question really was how does data governance impact the data storytelling? And it basically said, according to the article, data governance ensures that the data is using in the storytelling is accurate, reliable, and consistent and trustworthy. And I think we've been beating that up the whole time here. Is yes, we definitely agree with that part. The data governance helps address those trust issues. And then also says that data governance also ensures that the data used for storytelling is compliant with relevant regulations, policies, and ethical standards. Interesting. I don't think we talked about that point, but I would definitely agree. Those are relevant talking points around why you have data quality in place.
Yeah.
The data governance also enables the storyteller to access and use the right data for the right purpose and the right audience. And I think that we were touching a little bit on that as well, right? I get the right information in front of people so they can do the proper analysis. And I do think that makes sense. I think this also is speaking a bit more towards, we were also speaking a bit more towards the idea of data cataloging and actually having a place where people can go find information that is certified, ready to go, use this information, start here kind of methodology. Then lastly is data governance fosters a culture of collaboration and communication among data stakeholders. I liked that point, actually. And I think we were talking about ownership and who owns the data and when there's a problem in the data. And we actually talked in our conversation around, well, what happens when the source system, people are entering in bad data? Like we get the data from the system, it's wrong. We either clean it ourselves or we go back to the original system and say, go fix it. It's actually wrong in the source system. It needs to be corrected. So by digging deeper into these stories, potentially, I think maybe Tommy, this is what you were talking about. As you dig into these stories, you find there's really issues or problems in the data that wasn't caught, which then the story you're trying to develop needs to be cleaned, which means you now funnel that back into the data governance policy that says, hey, I found these 10 products that have inappropriate or not right descriptions, or the data's literally wrong. Someone needs to go back in and fix it because I shouldn't be applying the Band-Aid after the fact. We need to go back and apply more quality to our information further upstream, so that way when I build my data story, it's now correct, right?
That's pretty much exactly. So what I'm going to do from now on is just communicate to you internally what I'm trying to say.
Just send me, Just send me the ChatGPT prompt that you're using, so I can just use that instead, and I'll probably understand your point.
This is why you love ChatGPT, isn't it, Tommy? Like you are prompting all of your random ideas.
This is not even Tommy. Like, this is AI generated Tommy. He's been sleeping the whole morning.
I know.
He's not even real.
The way you're describing things, it's just so far advanced. Like ChatGPT brings it all into light.
Yeah, Tommy is ChatGPT actually.
Or maybe I'm just
well, every time you prompt something, it's Tommy behind the scenes typing up an answer for you.
I'm very busy.
Yeah.
Well,
Tommy GPT.
Yeah.
Maybe one time what we should do here is we should prompt ChatGPT at the beginning of the episode, and we should ask it a question, and that's the only position we're allowed to have for the entire podcast is whatever, and we have to keep prompting ChatGPT for some more answers to give us more details on how to speak our points and talk our stuff.
Hugely popular episode, I'm sure.
ChatGPT Tommy. I like it. I like it. It's good. All right. Well, we've done it again. You wasted a pretty good. Well, you've wasted a pretty good hour of your time hanging out with us at the Explosive Measures podcast. We really appreciate your listenership. The chat has been on fire. Really love it, chat. Thank you, everyone who participates. It makes it super fun and really adds a lot to the conversation. So we really appreciate you jumping in, taking time out of your day or evening or night or wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. We really enjoy it. With that, our only ask is, if you like this conversation, if you felt this was a good topic today and maybe pulled some nuggets out of this and like the article that we pointed out today, please go share it with somebody else. Let somebody else know you like the podcast. Share it on social media, or someone, if you go into the office anymore, I don't know if people even do that anymore. So if you see people that are not on a virtual screen, let them know you found this podcast interesting and there might be some additional nuggets they may want to get out of it. Thank you all so much. And Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
Well, it's Christmas in July, and we got 3 gifts for you. 1, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify. 2, you can have your question answered by us at the mailbag. Go to powerbi.tips/the podcast. And your last gift is watch us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Not sure these are great gifts. These are like, can I re-gift this one? I think I need to give it to somebody else. I'm gonna bundle this up and give it somewhere else. I'm not sure if that's the right thing. But anyways, I thoroughly appreciate it. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time. Have a great day. We'll talk to you later.